Hey there, students. Thank you for being part of this presentation. My name is Luis Silva, and today we're looking at world history from the Middle Ages to the rise of the Renaissance. Very important topic in world history. Western Europe emerged from the Middle Ages during an era known as the Renaissance. From the year 1300 all the way to the year 1600, Western Europe experienced a rebirth in trade, learning, and Greco-Roman ideas. The ideas of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans were brought together to improve the lives of people. During the Renaissance, Europeans developed new ideas in the arts, in government, and also human potential. This time period marked the beginning of the modern era. But what changed during the Middle Ages that gave rise to the Renaissance? Well, first we have trade and cities. Let's move on. What was trade like during the Middle Ages? Well, here you have a picture and you see that there is basically little or no trade. And this is something that we have to notice because this changed during the Renaissance. As you can see from this picture here, this is during the Renaissance. People are purchasing stuff, people are trading merchandise, and this is basically what marked the beginning of the Renaissance. The Crusades increased European demand for luxury goods from Asia. Italian merchants began meeting the demand for trade in Europe. As you can see in this map here, you have the first, the second, and the third and the fourth crusade. This went on from the year 1096 all the way to 1204. All of these crusades brought movement of goods from the Middle East to Europe, from Europe all the way to the Middle East. As a result, Italian cities and wealthy middle class began to form in Italy. The most important Italian city-state was Florence. Florence was very important because wealth from trade sparked the Renaissance in Florence. Florence was a significant, very important city because it basically gave birth to the Renaissance. As a result of trade and this movement of goods, a new middle class of bankers, merchants, and skilled craftsmen gained lots of power in Florence and other places in Italy. The Medici family were wealthy bankers who used basically the wealth they had to turn Florence into Italy's most artistic city. Very important. Like I mentioned to you before, Florence became basically the center of the Renaissance. Now, what changed during the Middle Ages that gave rise to the Renaissance? Now, in terms of government. What was government like during the Middle Ages? Well, you had feudalism, which you had the king on top. Underneath the king, you had church officials and the nobles. And underneath the nobles and church officials, you had knights. And way at the bottom, you had the peasants, which basically worked to support the knights, church officials, the nobles, as well as the king. This was the structure of government during the Middle Ages. Now, what was government like in the Renaissance? Well, during the Renaissance, with all of the accumulations of wealth, wealthy people were able to put together governments, very powerful governments that dominated societies. In France and other places in Europe, powerful kings dominated because they had acquired so much wealth. During this time, kings were able to tax merchants and use their wealth to build armies and strong nations, which hurt the power of feudal lords, ultimately ended the feudal system. From the year 1337 to 1453, England and France began a conflict called the 100 Years' War. During the war, nationalism increased as people became loyal to their king and also their nation rather than their lords. So the king, the nation became a symbol of power, and people began to follow these ideas that were being put together by powerful kings. During the 100 Years' War, new military weapons decreased the power of feudal lords and knights. Basically, this new technology, these new weapons became the dominant force during wars, and obviously feudal lords and knights lost a lot of their prestige and power. The discovery of Chinese gunpowder led to the development of cannons, which helped armies penetrate castles, like you see here on both of these images. The cannons were able to bring down walls, and armies could easily penetrate barriers or walls of cities. The invention of the longbow allowed soldiers to shoot accurately up to 300 yards, which decreased the importance of knights on horseback. So this is the beginning of the modern era, as everything that seemed to be of great importance during the Middle Ages was no longer important. What changed during the Middle Ages that gave rise to the Renaissance? Now, in terms of religion. What was religion like in the Middle Ages? Well, you have an image here which shows you the power of religion, how the Pope dominated religion and how the Pope was the ultimate authority. Here we have another image which shows us the importance of religion. Prior to the Renaissance, religion dominated the lives of people in Europe, and only religious leaders could read the Bible, interpret the Bible, and tell people what the Bible said. This was really important because people would follow religious leaders, but this started to change during the Renaissance. In the late Middle Ages, the Pope and the Catholic Church lost some of its influence as a result of the losses to Muslim armies during the Crusades. We have a map here again of the Crusades and when they took place. Despite having less influence, the Catholic Church was still an important part of people's lives, and the Pope also remained an important person that told people what to do. Now, what changed during the Middle Ages that gave rise to the Renaissance? Now, let's look at human potential. What were common people expected to do during the Middle Ages? Well, fairly simple. You have an image here in which you see how common people were expected to work to feed people that were above them. This was basically a lifestyle that literally and slowly killed people, because it was all about working to feed people that were higher up there, such as the king and the nobles. Now, what was expected of people during the Renaissance? Well, the Renaissance brought changes, brought inventions. As you can see from this image here, you see this person there. He is writing. He is bringing information out to people. So the Renaissance brought a whole bunch of writers, a whole bunch of artists that changed the lives of people with all of the information that they were able to put out there for people to read. During the Middle Ages, peasants did not own land and had no options other than to remain loyal to a feudal lord and work within the manorial system. They had to work under this system long hours to feed other people. Now, the rise of trade during the Renaissance gave people options to leave the manor and move to cities to serve as merchants or skilled artisans. As you can see here from this image, this was a big improvement in the lives of people because they are no longer dependent on that old system that took advantage of them, but now they could work to create something and become wealthy for many of them. One reason for the decline of the manorial system was the plague, also known as the Black Death or bubonic plague. And this plague literally killed millions of people. As you can see here from the map, it came from the Asian part of the world, and then it went all the way to Europe and many areas of northern Africa as well as the Middle East. In the year 1347, a trade ship arrived in Italy carrying plague-infested rats. The plague was able to basically move quickly throughout Europe along the trade routes, and this brought obviously death to millions of people. As you can see here, this is an image of the Black Death, bubonic plague, and you see people dead basically everywhere. You see that people literally were dying, and no one had an answer. Nobody had a cure for this disease, and ultimately killed millions of people. Here are some of the symptoms of the bubonic plague. You see how it was able to touch the lives of people in such a way that it gave way to a horrible death for millions of people in Europe. And there were people that believed that they could cure those ones infected by the bubonic plague, but the remedies that they had at that moment did not work for anybody. Some of those cures that people thought would work is like prayer, taking a bath in urine, isolation, leashes, placing dead animals in the home. These were some of the cures that many people believe would work to get rid of this plague, but unfortunately they did not work. As a matter of fact, many of the priests were afraid to get infected by this plague, and they no longer visited those people that were dying of this horrible plague that killed so many people. It is believed, estimated, that the plague killed about 25 million people in 5 years. That is 1/3 of the entire European population. The plague caused a labor shortage. Those that were able to survive were also able to demand higher wages and more rights, because so many people had died that there were not enough people to work. Therefore, they had leverage to ask for more money for their labor. During the Renaissance, people had more options than ever before, which led to a belief that people can accomplish anything. This is part of what we know as humanism. We believe that today. We believe that people can accomplish anything if they put their minds to getting things done. And this idea began during the Renaissance. Individuals became the center of attention during the Renaissance. Artists, writers, poets, painters, all of these people dominated the Renaissance and became very important individuals during this time period. Social status was based on wealth and ability, not on birthright. Prior to this, depending on the family that gave birth to you, that determined your social status. But now this was not the case. Social status was based on wealth and your abilities as an individual. A new way of thinking began during the Renaissance called Humanism. Humanists studied the classical ideas of Greece and Rome and believed that education could make the world a better place. And once again, it's an idea that we hold true today. Now, what was expected of men and women in the Renaissance? Let's look at the ideal man. The ideal man was well educated, was smart, was able to dance, was able to write poetry, and also play music. And this is what became known as the Renaissance man. Now, the ideal woman should have the same qualities as men, but should not seek fame or political power. Renaissance women were better educated, but had fewer rights than medieval women, unfortunately. As we have studied the Renaissance, please remember that a lot of the ideas that we hold true today came from the Renaissance, as people started to think differently, as people started to believe in themselves, in their human potential. And it's an idea that we are carrying even today. We have come to the end of this presentation. Please do not forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next presentation.